everybody, episode 806 of the podcast. It is Swimming America, the Outdoor Sports Podcast. It is Monday, December 11th, 2023. People, I hope everybody's doing. I hope everybody had a great weekend. It is that fun time of year where there's still a lot going on in the world of college football, but also college hoops was very busy this weekend, and we got ourselves a jam-packed show. From the football perspective, we will start. The Heisman Trophy was handed out on Saturday. Didn't think it was all that controversial until I went on social media. People were saying Jayden Daniels did not deserve to win. So we'll talk about it, why that's absurd, why he deserved to win, and why Michael Penix, look, he had a great year, but Jayden Daniels was your rightful winner. From there, we will then get into some college football transfer portal stuff. Busy weekend, successful weekend for Oregon, for Colorado, for Texas A&M, all the updates you need to know in the portal. Then from there, we're going to take a quick break, and what we'll do from there is talk a lot of college. I mean, the college hoop segment on this show is going to be the best 30 minutes of college hoops that you will hear anywhere on any program, anywhere in America this week. We're going to talk about that Purdue-Alabama game. Zach Edey, is he unfairly refereed as Alabama has 14 fewer foul shots than Purdue did in that game? By the way, that's a trend in Purdue games. We'll talk about another dominant Arizona effort. I've been telling you for a month they are the best team in college basketball. They very much look like it. And then we'll talk a little bit about Kentucky. Wrap the show with the Wildcats, who took care of Penn. But most importantly, Aaron Bradshaw, their star center, is back, and he is looking as good as advertised. Before we get started on college football, though, can I take 2 minutes? Can you forgive me for this? I'm going to do something I don't think I've ever done before on this show. Can I take 2 minutes to just talk baseball for a minute? Because listen, I was sitting there talking, watching college hoops, watching a little FCS college football playoffs, getting ready for Army-Navy, when I'm scrolling through social media, and I see Jeff Passan from ESPN report that Shohei Ohtani has signed a 10-year, $700 million deal. Now, I don't normally talk baseball on this show, but this is the single biggest story in sports right now. I would add, there isn't very often that I am shocked by anything in sports, but when you see $700 million committed to a single solitary athlete, can I spend, this is called the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, not the Aaron Torres Sports College Podcast, the Aaron Torres College Basketball Podcast, the Aaron Torres College Football Podcast. This is the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. This is stunning. So I want to dive in. I just want to spend 5 minutes on it. One, I mean, that number is just jarring, right? The $700 million for what athlete? Listen, I saw everyone on social media make some variation of the same joke. But yeah, if I had a son, I'd have him out in the backyard right now. We'd be working on the curveball and hitting the curveball, because $700 million, it's just so inconceivable. And $70 million a year for a single athlete is crazy as well. Now, you guys know, if you've listened to this show, I've actually talked to Ohtani a few times. I find him to be the single most fascinating athlete on the planet. And you know, I've talked about it on this show, is I think it shows why baseball has fallen behind other sports, because he is the single most uniquely gifted athlete on planet Earth. To be the best pitcher and the best hitter on planet Earth at the same time is something none of us ever thought that we would see, yet that's exactly who this guy is. So he's worth every penny. Now, I know the money's deferred, but that is still an insane amount of money. But living in LA, I just find it fascinating. Just a couple quick thoughts on just the whole thing outside of the dollars and cents. And yes, if I had a son, I'd be in the backyard throwing curveballs at him until my elbow fell off. So first of all, I think this is interesting about the Ohtani thing. One, it's a little nerdy because I live in LA. By the way, shout out to Torres. I'm going to have to take out I'm going to have to sell, blood just to get to a Dodgers game this year. Tickets are probably going to be astronomical. But I think it's interesting. The $70 million price tag per year reflects to me that they think he's going to pitch. Why do I think that's interesting? Okay, so really quick, and we'll get to college football, I promise. But remember, Ohtani had elbow surgery not that long ago, okay? It's his second elbow surgery. I'm not a doctor, but all the doctors say, like, the first elbow surgery, you can get back to normal. Once you start getting into the second, third, fourth one, it is not as easy. But the $70 million a year, $700 million price tag reflects to me the Dodgers think he's going to pitch at an insane level. That's crazy to think about, right? Because when we started talking about what his contract could be in the offseason, and I know I can't believe I'm talking baseball either here, but when we started talking about his contract in the offseason, you would see numbers like 70 million a year, 60 million a year thrown around, but it was under the assumption that he was going to pitch and hit. Well, he just had elbow surgery. He is not pitching in 2024, but this contract seems to reflect that he is going to be pitching with the Dodgers. And I saw, Jeff Passan's article on ESPN basically said they think he's going to be their opening day starter in 2025. So that's one. And then my only other real thought, I promise we'll get to college football here in a minute. I saw a lot of people that are not Dodgers fans say, oh, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to baseball. Because, of course, a few years ago, the Dodgers signed Freddie Freeman from the Braves. The year before, they trade four Mookie Betts from the Red Sox. And basically, this has like an evil empire, old school New York Yankees feel to it. Well, one, it doesn't have the evil empire New York Yankees feel because the Dodgers haven't really won anything yet. They won the one title in the baseball bubble. Now, they had fans in the stands. It wasn't quite like the NBA bubble, but it was pretty close to it. But it's not the evil empire because they're not winning. And two, like, I know that a lot of you are Reds fans or Braves fans or whomever fans. But I just, I see all these people, oh, this is terrible for baseball. Man, I've been watching sports long enough to know you put these super teams together, it always looks unbeatable on paper. And it never really ends up being the way that you think it's going to be. I remember I had just started in this business, had my own little blog that nobody read when LeBron signed with the Heat, like right out of school, just writing wherever I could write. At the time, I remember when LeBron signed with the Heat and it was like, well, nobody else has a chance. Why even play the season? And then what happened? They lost to the Dallas Mavericks in the finals. They ended up winning 2, but they were together for 4 years total. They ended up winning 2 and then it broke up. When KD signed with the Warriors, it felt like that was going to go on forever and they were going to own the NBA forever. They ended up winning 2 in 3 years, and then KD ended up leaving. So these things don't always come together the way that you think. I mean, think about KD, James Harden, and Kyrie with the Brooklyn Nets. Didn't work out. Whatever. Brady and Randy Moss with the Patriots never won a Super Bowl. So I don't buy that this is like the end of baseball as we know it. And I think the other thing too, as somebody who lives in LA, Dave Roberts is a debacle as a manager. And I get it. Like, he's a puppet of the front office, whatever. But I just bring it up because everyone in LA, it's like, you got to fire this guy. And they just keep bringing him back. And so the way that I think about it, it's almost what I've talked about with Ryan Day on this show, which is like, I don't really think it matters who's Michigan's quarterback, who's Oregon's quarterback, who's Washington. Like, if Ryan Day's the coach at Ohio State, I don't believe he will ever get them back to the level that Urban Meyer had him at. And so it's kind of the same with the Dodgers. I don't trust their management. I don't trust their manager. And I don't really care who the players are. So I don't want to spend too much time talking baseball to lead the show, but I had to talk a little bit of Ohtani on this show. $700 million, excuse me. Rounding error there. Unbelievable. Cannot believe it. Unbelievable. So what we're going to do, since I just talked like 8 minutes of baseball at the top, we'll take a quick break, come back, a lot of college football, then a lot of college basketball. So did not think I was going to start the show where we ended up starting, but I do want to switch gears. I do want to talk a little bit of college football, okay? And the reason I want to talk college football is because even though the season is done, a lot of stuff happened over the weekend that I think is worth discussing. We're going to hit on the transfer portal momentarily, but where I want to start is a place that, frankly, I did not think I was going to start on today's show, and that was with the Heisman Trophy ceremony. And the reason I didn't think I was going to be talking Heisman Trophy is because I didn't really think there was that much to really talk about. I thought we all kind of went into the weekend knowing that Jayden Daniels was going to win. I had my producer print up, make up some graphics with Jayden Daniels winning. Like, I didn't think it was really a conversation. Well, Jayden Daniels wins on Saturday. And the second that he wins, I actually saw a little bit of pushback on it. I saw the typical, well, he didn't win his conference. He lost in 3 games. How good could he be? I saw the whole, well, my vote goes to, can you tell the story of the season without this player? And you could tell the story without Jayden Daniels. So I saw a lot of grandstanding on social media. I thought most of it was ridiculous. So let's just dive into the Jayden Daniels Heisman defense. Didn't know I had to defend Jayden Daniels, but apparently I do. So let's go ahead and jump in. First of all, the stats were amazing. And you could debate, no conference championship, no division championship, whatever. The stats were unreal. Led college football, total passing touchdowns, 40 passing touchdowns. How about this? He set an NCAA record 11.7 yards per completion. So literally, basically, every time he dropped back to throw a pass, it was a first down. That is an insane stat. Now, obviously, that's not exactly how it happened. But basically, statistically, every pass he threw, every pass he completed was a first down. So I guess I shouldn't say every pass he threw, but every pass he completed essentially became a first down. That is unbelievable. On top of that, he had what I believe to be the greatest individual game that I have ever seen. It was against Florida late in the season. We talked about it on the show. I was watching it and I was like, I've never seen anything like this. I'm not going to pull up the box score, but it was like he averaged like 17 yards of completion and 13 yards per rush, 606 yards of total offense in that game. It was worth noting. On top of that, by the way, for everybody that wants to argue, well, he lost 3 games. Well, one of the games he lost was Ole Miss, where LSU put up 49 points. And remember, Alabama had no answer for him until what many believe to be was a cheap shot by Dallas Turner knocked him out of the game. So those were 2 of the losses right there. The other one was in week 1 to Florida State. But on top of all of that, and I think this is an important note too, incredible passer, incredible runner, 1,100 yards rushing for a quarterback. That is insane. I saw Josh Pate from 24/7 Sports say this on Twitter on Sunday. I thought it was a good point. He says, like, when you have QB1 stats and running back 1 stats, it's really not that hard of a debate. So there's that part of it. But then beyond that, there's the other stuff. One, don't sell me on, well, he lost 3 games. It's like, yeah, so what? It is about being the best, most outstanding, and I know it's not in the wording and description, but the most valuable player in college football. Well, I'll go back to an old Jim Boeheim quote. Remember when Jim Boeheim, many years ago, this might predate many of our listeners. Remember when he was asked about Jerry McNamara? There was I remember because I was at the game as a fan that he talked about this in the podium. But there was an article in the student newspaper that said Jerry McNamara was overrated. Jerry McNamara was a Syracuse legend. And Jim Boeheim goes to the podium and goes, we wouldn't have won 10 effing games without Jerry McNamara. So you don't know what you're talking about. That was Jayden Daniels. Yes, they went 9-3. How many games would they have lost if they got even B+ to A- quarterback play instead of A++? Remember, Missouri, a 10-win team. Their 2 losses at Georgia and LSU at home. Jayden Daniels led a furious comeback to win that game. Against, what was the other one? Arkansas. 3-point win. Jayden Daniels was the difference in that game. And so don't tell me that he lost 3 games because LSU probably would have lost 5 or 6 without him. They lost 3. They easily would have lost to Missouri. They easily would have lost to Arkansas without him. Don't tell me that he wasn't a difference maker in a lot of those games. Beyond that, I'll also say this. I saw this one, which was like, let me put it this way. I don't want to pick on anybody in specific, but I saw a couple writers that have Heisman votes, whatever. You're allowed your opinion. But I saw this narrative is, can you tell the story of the season without this specific player? And my argument for Jayden Daniels is so the argument is you can tell the story of the 2023 college football season without Jayden Daniels. One, I disagree because he had some of the greatest individual performances that we've seen ever. But 2, if that was the standard, then guess what? You know who else wouldn't be a Heisman Trophy winner? Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson went 9-3 the year at Louisville, and you easily could have told the story of that season without him. Johnny Manziel, I guess you probably couldn't tell the story of that season because he beat Alabama. That was Alabama's only loss on the way to a national championship. But you probably could have told the story without Johnny Manziel. So, like, the idea that this is the first time that anyone that has ever lost multiple games wins the Heisman is ridiculous. So I just sit there and say, I think it's absurd. And I think it speaks to, like, I don't know. I don't even know what else to say because it's so frustrating, this narrative that somehow it has to be held against him that he lost games when in reality they would have lost a lot more without him. Okay. Give him Alabama's defense, give him Florida State's defense, give him Oregon's defense. They're undefeated. They're the favorite to win the national championship. So congratulations to Jayden Daniels. I don't need to go on. He was a deserving winner. If you disagree, that's your prerogative, but you're wrong. Quickly, because I do want to get to a lot of college hoops. We got a lot of college hoops to discuss, okay? Quickly, do want to talk a little college football transfer portal, though, because I'll tell you this. The portal opened on Monday, and the portal is humming, and more specific than the portal humming is the fact that it is worth noting that this was the first weekend that, the portal opened Monday. So this was the first weekend that players could visit. This was kind of the first big wave of commitments. And I think we saw some very interesting things that I think are going to help shape and define the 2024 season happening this weekend via the portal. So I want to get into it. I want to break it down. I want to talk about some of the big portal moving and shaking. But let me start by, if you're a college football fan, stating the obvious. There was no bigger portal winner this weekend than the Oregon Ducks. And frankly, I don't even think it was that close. So Oregon, listen, I'll say this. Dan Lanning is a dog, okay? Dan Lanning is, like, I think he's the future of college football. And I've said this many, many, many times on this show, but this is a guy that I think he gets the landscape better than everybody, right? Because you have the older coaches that they don't really like NIL. They don't really like the portal. Dan Lanning's like 35, 36, and he's just like, look, this is the world. And I'm going to be in this world for the next 20 to 30 years, so I might as well get used to it. And I've said this on this show before, but I talk to people who are around that program, and they're like, look, when we had Mario Cristobal, we thought he was a monster in recruiting, and he is. But Dan Lanning is a whole nother level. And Dan Lanning has a plan for the 2024 kids and the 25 kids and the 26 recruiting class, which is now just sophomores. And he has plans for the portal and grad transfers and undergrad. And I bring it up because this school is working quick, and it is clear that whether you like it or not, in this portal era where everybody is trying to just gather information and be prepared, that Dan Lanning and Oregon were prepared going into this portal cycle. First off, they got the single biggest commitment of the portal so far, at least as I'm recording here at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma transfer, decides to go to Oregon. So Oregon replaces a Heisman Trophy finalist in Bo Nix with one of the best quarterbacks in college football, Dylan Gabriel. This year, 3,900 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. This guy was phenomenal, okay? And a couple things here. One, I've seen a lot of this, and let's just clarify. Anyone who sits there and, by the way, 3,700 yards, give or take, forgive the 200-yard difference, okay? But a couple things. One, I saw a little bit of the, like, how can you leave Oklahoma? He wasn't going to be the starter. It was clear that they want to let Jackson Arnold, the 5-star who sat behind him this year, they want to give him the reins. That's okay. That's Oklahoma's prerogative, whatever, but it's his prerogative to look around. But you look at who he is. I think he's one of the most talented quarterbacks in college football. He's not perfect, because if he was, he'd already be in the pros. But as far as a really, really, really good college quarterback, he is on the very short list of very talented players. Two, I think it's a near perfect fit for him because they're going to have so much talent around him. And I'm not going to sit here and, like, pick apart the Oklahoma or the Oregon depth chart right now, but Dan Lanning, as I said, is a monster in recruiting, and they are going to have a team with talent at the skill positions, with a great offensive line. A lot of their best offensive linemen are coming back. A lot of their best defensive players are coming back. And oh, by the way, they had a huge name in the portal on campus this weekend. So just a great, great, great recruiting win for Oregon and Dan Lanning. And they are set at the quarterback position for 2024. What's wild about Oregon, there are 2 other notes from the portal on them. And one is that this is incredible. They might not be done in the portal this offseason at quarterback. So the report is, I think it was Chad Simmons, I want to say, from On3. If it was somebody else that reported this, I apologize. I think it was Chad Simmons, great recruiting writer. He reported that Dante Moore, who was UCLA's starting quarterback for most of this year, former 5-star, only number 2 recruit in the 2023 class at the quarterback spot, behind only Arch Manning. He announced he's transferring from UCLA and that he might end up committing to Oregon too. Now, a lot of people would sit there and say, why would you go to Oregon? You just told me, Torres, that they just signed a starting quarterback for next year. Well, one thing about Dante Moore, he has said repeatedly throughout this process that he wants to go to a place where it's not about being a starter. It's about being developed properly. And so I think from his perspective, he's sitting there saying, well, look, they may already have their starter. I can sit back for a year. I can learn. I can take it all in, and I can be ready to be the dude in 2025. So we'll see. Michigan is hotly after Dante Moore, Florida State, Miami. There's others that are certainly interested. But if Oregon can stack that quarterback room with a 5th-year starter this year, and then in 2025 have a 3rd-year guy, a former 5-star who has started big-time college football games ready to go, you can't ask for much more than that if you're an Oregon fan. So credit Dan Lanning. He's got it rolling. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one other thing about Oregon. They had the best player in the portal on campus this weekend. So they get a commitment from what I believe to be the best quarterback in the portal. One of the 2, 3, 4 best quarterbacks may come in as a backup. But also Walter Nolan, who was the number 2 overall player in the high school class of 2022, behind only Travis Hunter. Played the last 2 years at Texas A&M. His first visit this weekend, it was to Eugene, Oregon, and visit the Oregon Ducks. And so this is a defensive lineman, kind of more of a tackle than an edge guy, but big, physical, 8.5 TFLs this year, 4 sacks. I thought he played really well. I thought he stood out when I watched A&M every week. And so he is visiting Oregon. Now he is he's a hot property. He's from Tennessee. I think Tennessee's in the mix, Georgia, Texas, maybe a LSU, somebody like that. But I just bring it up, Alabama maybe potentially as well. But I just bring it up because to have the number 1 quarterback on campus and the number 1 defensive lineman on campus, that is a huge, huge, huge weekend. And what I would say about portal recruiting, it's important to note, like, kids are not taking visits if they are not seriously considering your school. So big weekend for Oregon. As I record, he has not committed yet. Maybe that will change. My guess is that he is the type of kid that is going to take his time. So we will see. But busy weekend at Oregon. Really quickly, I just mentioned Walter Nolan, a former 5-star defensive lineman from A&M. Thought it was worth noting a few things on A&M. One, there was a lot of negativity about A&M this weekend because they had a bunch of players at the portal. It is worth noting, though, they did get a very nice commitment on what would have been Sunday evening. Will Lee, a cornerback who was basically one of the best defensive players at Kansas State last year, he ended up committing to Texas A&M. Remember, Kansas State, their new offensive coordinator, Colin Klein. I almost said Colin Quinn. Colin Klein comes from Kansas State. He brings with him, now I don't necessarily think one has to do with the other, but one of their best defensive players now goes to A&M. And I think it's important because A&M has lost about 7 or 8 marquee players since Mike Elko took over. Deuce Harmon hit the portal, although he says that he may come back a defensive back. Tyreek Chappelle hit the portal. He is a defensive back as well. Walter Nolan, we just mentioned. Fadil Diggs, we just mentioned. There was another 5-star that made some waves this weekend, LT Overton. Okay, so he was a 5-star in the class of 2023, decided to reclassify, played the last 2 years at A&M. 2 schools appear to be in the lead for LT Overton. The first one, Alabama, got a visit from him on Friday. He got a visit from them on Friday. We'll see if he ends up seriously considering them. But then on top of that, he also visited South Carolina this weekend. So South Carolina is hemorrhaging players left and right. If they could somehow get a commitment from this kid, that would be huge. Really talented defensive lineman. Those are the kinds of guys that you need to win in the SEC. We'll see if it'll happen with LT Overton. A couple other notes from the portal. One, I just did a pretty big segment on this on YouTube, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But for anybody who wants to criticize Colorado and Coach Prime, and it's your prerogative. They went 4-8. Coach Prime had a busy weekend in the portal, okay? And so a couple of things is one is that obviously last week they get the 5-star offensive tackle out of high school in Jordan Seaton. But they needed help along the offensive line. And how about this? On Saturday, they picked up 5 commitments total, 4 on the offensive line. The most notable ones, Tyler Johnson, a 2-year starter from Houston, Khalil Benson, who started every game in Indiana this year. And so I know there's going to be a lot of pushback. Torres, you talk too much about Coach Prime, blah, blah, blah. First of all, I talk about what you guys want to talk about. You guys love him. You guys hate him. People care about Coach Prime. But the one thing I'll give Coach Prime credit for, Deion Sanders, is it was clear that he was not happy with the O-line. And you can debate, did he go too hard? Should he have called them out as a unit after that UCLA game? But it's clear he prioritized it, and it is clear that he is upgrading that position group. Again, 4 quality offensive linemen out of the portal on Saturday. A 5-star out of the out of the high school ranks. By the way, this isn't portal stuff, but they also got a commitment from a top 100 wide receiver out of Texas named Draylon Miller this weekend out of high school. So in the last week, 2 top 100 recruits, 5 portal players, and he's doing what he does. Now, obviously, it's got to translate onto the field, but I will tell you what I keep saying about Coach Prime. I don't think Colorado is as far off as people think. I know they went 4-8. I know they started 3-0, which means they went 1-8 down the stretch, okay? But at the same time, of their 8 losses, 5 were by a touchdown or less. That included, by the way, a walk-off loss to Arizona, which ended up winning 9 games. They were in that game till the end. They ended up losing by 6 to Utah. Utah finished 8-4. Utah was on a 3rd-string quarterback, but Colorado was on a backup quarterback in that game. USC, they had the ball driving late in the game with a chance to tie the game up. They lose by 7. So 7-point loss to USC. Close loss to Oregon State. Utah, which finished 8-4, they lose by 6. And then Arizona, which finished 9-3, they lose by 3. This team isn't that far off. Now it's on Coach Prime. Got to get better. Got to, trim the margins. But he is upgrading the talent, as he said he would, 4 offensive lines, caliber starters. And by the way, he's not done. That's the other thing, too, is he gets a couple commitments. People say, well, you need more than that. Yeah, you think Coach Prime is done? No, but these were the guys that were available right now. And these are the guys that he's going to go get. And finally, what I will say about Coach Prime, and I've said it a lot, you can like him, you can hate him, whatever. But if you think that he is done recruiting, think again. You get guys in front of him. This guy is a game changer. This guy could get, if you put a kid in front of him, if you put a kid with his parents in front of him, Coach Prime's got a shot. Picked up 2 top 100 recruits in the last couple of days, 5 players out of the portal. Can't wait to see what he does next. A couple other notes from the weekend. 1, Louisville. How about Louisville picking up 2 marquee players out of the portal from the Ivy League? Okay. Offensive lineman Jonathan Mendoza. He came from Yale. He was a kid with offers from Pitt, Kentucky, etc. A lot of Power 5 offers. And then, this is a great name, defensive lineman Thor Griffith from Harvard. Another guy entered the portal, was very coveted by Power 5 schools. He ends up committing to Louisville. Kentucky, cross-state rival, Raymond Cottrell, 6'3" receiver from Texas A&M, really talented recruit, barely played this year, decided to redshirt. He ends up at Kentucky. Kentucky, of course, already has the commitment from Brock Vandegrift, so busy weekend there as well. I'm sure I missed some portal stuff. Here's the good news. Portal's going to be open. Players are going to be entering for another 3 weeks. And there's plenty going to be more to react to. So we will get to some more portal stuff. Do want to go ahead and wrap with a little bit of college hoops. A lot of bit of college hoops, actually, because it felt like this was the first Saturday that bluntly, a lot of America was kind of locked in on college hoops, right? There was no college football. NFL really hasn't started yet on those Saturdays. We're going to have some Saturday NFL coming up. This was not one of those Saturdays, no bowl games. And really for about those 4 or 5 hours before Army Navy, it was all college hoops on my timeline, and it was awesome. And so I want to dive in. I got a lot of thoughts. I've been watching college hoops, even if we haven't talked a ton on this show. But before we get into it, really, like the big college hoops story that I think like we just need to talk about very quickly had nothing to do with a result or a final score or a hot take or whatever. It was obviously the situation with USC and Bronny James. I think everybody knows, but Bronny James, the son of LeBron James, on Sunday made his debut for USC. Came just a few months, frankly, after he suffered cardiac arrest at practice. I think at the time, obviously, there was talk of will he ever play again, safety, health, all that. But he made his debut on Sunday for the USC Trojans. Don't think there's really a hot take here. Nothing to really add. Happy for him. Happy that he's healthy. Happy that he's able to play a game that he loves. Happy that he's able to do it under the supervision of some incredible doctors and incredible staff at USC. I think everybody knows, right? But USC actually had another player suffer cardiac arrest about a year before Bronny. So this is now 2 situations with 2 separate kids where those doctors that are in that building have saved lives. Happy for Bronny. Happy for his family. LeBron was able to be there in person on Sunday after obviously playing in the in-season tournament. Don't think there's a hot take there either. Whether you like LeBron, whether you hate LeBron as a player, he's a father first. By all accounts, he's an incredible father. I know a lot of people around that family at USC basketball who say, great dad, hands off, lets the coaching do what the coaches do, whatever. You don't need me to get into all that. But LeBron is a dad first. Happy for him. Happy for his son that his son is okay. Happy to see him back on the court. With that, I do want to get to some results, and I do want to get to some hot takes, and I do want to talk about the results from Saturday. And so let's jump in because to me, from a conversation standpoint, I think the most interesting result is Purdue beating Alabama 92-86 in Toronto. Homecoming game for Zach Edey, the National Player of the Year. Ironically, he's an All-American, but he's from Canada originally. So this game was designed to get him in front of his home fans in Toronto. They showed out. He had a lot of family, a lot of friends, a lot of et cetera in this game. Purdue wins the game, but why I want to talk about it and why I want to lead with it is because, frankly, I believe that college basketball has a little bit of an issue with this specific player. He's a great player, an insane talent, but it feels like every marquee game that he plays in is absolutely marred by the officials. I don't think officials have in any way, shape, or form figured out how to referee him. And I thought the officiating really hurt the product on the court on Saturday. As Purdue won, Purdue was a deserving winner, but Purdue also shot 14 more foul shots than Alabama. It is a trend that has gone on in big games. And if you watch the game, it was hard for Alabama to get into any flow, any rhythm, anything, because every single time that they touched Zach Edey, there was a foul. And as I said, this is a trend. Before we get into Bama specifically, let me say a couple things. Okay. One, Zach Edey's an incredible player. And this isn't going to be like the typical, oh, he's just a big guy that's like, oh, no. Very talented, very skilled, 7'4", was last year's National Player of the Year, and very deservedly so. He would have had my vote last year. If there was a National Player of the Year vote right now, he would get my vote. But and I would also add this too. The fouls aren't the reason that Alabama lost the game. Matter of fact, the reason Alabama lost the game wasn't even Zach Edey. It was that Braden Smith, the guard for Purdue, he's kind of been pretty good as a sophomore this year, had 27 points. And down the stretch, he was their best player, and he was the dude making plays. And Purdue, he was the reason Purdue won, and Purdue deserved to win, okay? So this isn't going to be a tear down Purdue. They're overrated. They stink. They whatever. They this, they that. No. But at the same time, I think it's hard to deny that Purdue games are unfortunately marred by officiating. And bluntly, they're hard to watch. And frankly, listen, I'm just going to say it as a consumer of college basketball. I don't care who wins and who loses. I just want the games to be competitive, to be fun, and to be fairly officiated. And if you watch the games, it's hard to argue that that's happening. By the way, that's not just my opinion. That's a fact. Just for fun, because when I tweeted about it, Alabama fans, Tennessee fans, Gonzaga, you want to unite Alabama and Tennessee fans? Who knew it would be over Purdue basketball? But here's the bottom line. I would argue that Purdue's 4 biggest games this year were the 3 games of the Maui Invitational: Gonzaga, Tennessee, Marquette, and then Alabama on Saturday, okay? I bring it up because just for fun, I wanted to look it up. I was like, am I going crazy? Am I losing my mind, or is the officiating one-sided in these games? Well, I went ahead and looked it up. In those 4 games, the 4 biggest games that Purdue has played all year. So you'd hope they'd also be the 4 best officiated games. They'd be the 4 most whatever. Purdue is plus 44 in free throws in those games. That means against the 4 best opponents that they've played, they have averaged 11 more free throws per game in those games than their opponents. Well, look at the final scores. Beat Alabama by 6. Beat Tennessee by 4 in a game where they shot 18 more free throws than Tennessee. Remember, that was the game they shot 48 total free throws. You cannot tell me that it is just that he's too big, that they don't have an answer for him, that that's all part of Purdue's plan. Purdue's plan is not to go to the free throw line 48 times, even if it is to feed the post and try to get the other team's players in foul trouble. And so when I look at this, put aside your feelings, put aside emotion. These are just the facts. If you're averaging 11 more free throws per game in your biggest games, that's not just a strategy thing. That's not just a great coaching thing. That is that refs have no idea what to do. And that's what stood out to me watching that game against Alabama. If you watch the game, I'm just here. There was like at least 5 or 6 plays where you're just like, what is that call? There was a play right before the half where, the Purdue threw an inbound pass. Edey jumps up to catch it. It's way over his head, which shout out to the inbound passer. I don't know how you overthrow a guy that's 7'4". You had to throw it 9-10 feet in the air, but he jumps up and he tries to come down to grab it. The Alabama defender is standing there with his hands like this, and he gets called for a foul. The poor kid was practically in tears because he's like, what am I supposed to do? I'm standing here. I'm not moving. And so to me, that is the frustrating part. By the way, you know how I know that the calls got one-sided? It's because Robbie Hummel was on the broadcast. Okay, Robbie Hummel is an excellent broadcaster. I like Robbie. I know him just a tiny little bit. I actually saw him on vacation last year, which was kind of weird. We chatted it up for a little bit. Won't share his vacation travels, but I bring it up because I see him here and there. I've been on his radio show on Sirius XM. I like Robbie. He's an incredible broadcaster. And the one thing I will say, he never shows any favoritism at all towards Purdue, even though he's a Purdue former player. But at the same time, there was 2 or 3 times on that broadcast where he's just like, I mean, what is it? He literally said, that's a tough call. I mean, what is Alabama supposed to do? What is the Alabama defender supposed to do there when the whistles are being called? And of course, Purdue fans, because they're fans, fan is short for fanatic, that's fine. Purdue fans would sit there and say, he didn't mean, what are they supposed to do? And the refs are supposed to call. Like, Purdue fans, just acknowledge the games are not called evenly and fairly. And I know what a lot of people will say, because I got a lot of this. Well, Torres, when a guy is so much bigger and so much stronger, there is no right way to call games. Every game is physical. Every play is physical. Every play there could be a foul call. Okay, I agree with that. And I know I'm rambling, but this has me fired up. I agree with the fact that with a guy that big and that physical, it is impossible to 100% evenly distribute foul calls and whatever, okay? But at the same time, I remember watching Shaq, like Shaquille O'Neal Shaq. And this was a constant problem for him. But at the same time, if the argument is that basically Zach Edey, it's so physical, it's impossible to know, he gets fouled on every play. Watch the games, because there are plenty of times where he could be called for fouls and he is not. Go back and watch the games. And by the way, it's not, again, let's put aside my opinions, my emotions, my whatever, okay? I went ahead and looked it up. So remember, Alabama had 2 players fall out on Saturday, 1 more that finished with, I think 2 more that finished with 4 fouls, 1 more, I believe. I bring it up because, you know when Zach Edey picked up his first foul? He picked it up like with the 12-minute mark of the second half. So you mean to tell me that every single play down low is physical, is tough, there's contact, yet Alabama is constantly committing fouls, but Zach Edey is never committing fouls? Give me a break. Same with Tennessee, same with Marquette, same with Gonzaga. And by the way, I looked this up too. As I said, Purdue is plus 11, plus 44 in the 4 biggest games, plus 11 per game, shooting 11 free throws per game more a game in their biggest games. You know what's another fun fact? Zach Edey has yet to foul out of a single game this year. And in those 4 games, he's averaging about 2.6, 2.7 fouls per game. So you mean to tell me on the most physical player in the country, the toughest player in the country, if we're acknowledging that he basically gets fouled on every play because there's contact on every play. So there's contact on him every play. But he's not initiating any of the contact. He's not initiating any of the fouls. And oh, by the way, here was the other thing I heard. Well, Alabama just shoots a lot of threes. Purdue works the ball in the paint. Alabama came into Saturday averaging the 4th most free throw attempts in college basketball. Nate Oates is notorious. We know what he's notorious for. Free throws and 3-pointers and layups. That's all he wants. He doesn't want the mid-range too. Take a 3, drive the basket, get a layup, get fouled. They averaged 28, even after Saturday, they averaged 28 free throws per game, had just 14 on Saturday. So I could go on, and I don't know what the answer is, but I just want to see the games balanced and called more fairly. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask for, but apparently it is. So we'll see what happens. The thing I would say too, by the way, I had Purdue fans on my butt on Saturday and Sunday, and I don't really care. It's been a while since I kind of got into one with a fan base. It's been a while. I miss those days. But why I bring it up is because the irony is, I think this actually hurts Purdue in the long run. I think it hurts Purdue in March. You want to talk about all the reasons Purdue loses in March? One, their guards generally have not been good enough, although, as I said, Braden Smith played really well on Saturday. But at the same time, you're not going to have games refereed in March the way that they're refereed now. And I think this is actually something that has hurt them come March. One, the Big Ten, Purdue, the Big Ten, everybody knows how to referee you, whatever. But 2, go to the NCAA tournament, okay? Something stands out to me about this. In the NCAA tournament, remember, refs are graded the same way that, refs are under a microscope the same way that coaches are under a microscope and players are under a microscope, okay? And I bring it up because, remember, for refs to move on to the next round, they are graded by their superiors. And so I bring it up because, do you think that referees are going to have a game where one team shoots 48 free throws like Purdue did against Tennessee? You do that in the tournament when everybody's watching, it is going to trend on social media, and that referee group is not going to advance. So on the one hand, I don't think Purdue is going to get all of the calls that they got on Saturday. But 2, it's also worth noting, I don't think Zach Edey is going to get away with everything that he gets away with. And he gets away with a lot too, by the way. Purdue, oh my God, you don't understand basketball. No, I understand basketball. By the way, there was a play late in the game. Did you see the flagrant foul called on him? He almost ripped a guy's arm off, like literally had him in an arm bar and pulled down. And I'm like, dude, you could have separated that kid's shoulder. And he's complaining about the call going against him. And again, Robbie Hummel, who's great at what he does, excellent broadcaster. I'm not criticizing him in any way, but he was like, yeah, that's definitely a flagrant. And he had another announcer, Benetti's like, I think Benetti's afraid to offend Robbie Hummel or afraid to offend Purdue fans. He's like, well, I don't know. It's like, no, he almost ripped his arm off. So I'm done with the rant. Purdue deserved to win. They were the better team. But I do think college basketball has an officiating crisis with this kid. They need to figure it out. It needs to be more balanced. It can't be that every single team, every single big guy fouls out. If it's physical, it's got to be physical both ways. If it's physical, you can't call every time he gets touched. I don't even know what else to say. It was so frustrating to watch because it was such an entertaining game that was marred and frankly ruined by the referees, just like, by the way, the Tennessee game 2 or 3 weeks ago in the Maui Invitational. And frankly, the Gonzaga game, Gonzaga was up big early, in control, and then the refs took over. The other thing, too, I would say really quick, people say, well, he just wears people down. Well, part of what I said a minute ago about the idea of, Purdue's winning these games by 2, 3, 5, 7 points, and they're taking, 10, 12, 15 more free throws than their opponent. The other factor is, and I'm rambling, so I'll be quick. I promise. If you're watching on YouTube, my hands are all over the place. I can't control it. But I bring it up because I think that's part of it too, is it's not just the free throws. It's the fact that all these teams are having to I'm not even going to go on. I'm not even going to go on. The point I'm trying to make, we will see what happens. I think this is going to hurt Purdue in the long run, and I think college basketball has an officiating crisis. These Purdue games aren't even fun to watch because every single touch is a foul. People need to figure it out, and I think it's going to hurt them in March. All right, promise. Let's go to some positivity. Let's deep breath. Let's close our Monday show on some positive vibes, and let's go ahead and look at some of the other results from Saturday. First one that stands out, you know who Purdue's next opponent is? They have a week off for finals. They play Arizona in Indianapolis on next Saturday. Now, I will probably preview the game on Friday's show. I'm already mad because the game is streaming only. The powers that be in college sports have ruined everything for everybody. It's so hard to watch all these games. I don't have Peacock. Now I have to get Peacock, and I need to, whatever. But Arizona plays Purdue. But before Arizona plays Purdue, they hosted Wisconsin on Saturday, okay? This game was close for about 7-8 minutes. And then Arizona just boat raced them. Final score in this one, 98-73. Do you know how hard it is to score 98 points on Wisconsin with the style of play that they play? How about this? The last time they gave up that many points per ESPN stats and info was 1994. So it's been 29 years since anyone has scored at the volume of Arizona. And I'm just here to say this. They'll play Purdue next week, whatever. But I have said since the Duke game in the first week of the season, Arizona is the best team that I have seen in college basketball this year. I thought it was confirmed on Saturday yet again. Now, in terms of Arizona, I think a couple things stand out. One, it is the number of guys that can beat you, okay? They have 5 different guys. All 5 starters are averaging in double figures. All 5 starters scored in double figures on Saturday. How about this? Pelle Larsson is their 4th leading scorer. He had 21 points to lead him against Wisconsin. So you take away Caleb Love, somebody else beats you. You take away Keyshawn Johnson, my guy. You know I'm a Keyshawn Johnson guy. Somebody else beats you. And so they're so good at, they have so many guys that can beat you offensively. But here's the other thing. I just spent a lot of time talking about Alabama, okay? I bring it up because I remember talking about this with Alabama last year. Last year, Alabama, you could criticize, Brandon Miller, whatever. But they were so on the court in terms of basketball. They were so good offensively that you didn't realize they were pretty much good at everything else too. And why I said at the beginning, I was like, Alabama's the best team in the country. It was because they were so good offensively, everyone focused on that. But I don't remember all the details now, but they were basically a top 10 defensive team, a top 10 rebounding team, a top 10 whatever, okay? And it's kind of the same with Arizona. So Arizona is just destroying people. They're scoring at will. In terms of in terms of scoring as a team, they are, let's see here, well, this is not right. Well, golly gee whiz. Give me 1 second here as I pull up stats in a very bad manner. So Arizona right now is the number 2 scoring team in college basketball, averaging 94 points per game. Not bad, I would say, whatever, blah, 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 this and that. Why do I bring it up? It is because everyone focuses so much on the Arizona offensive production. They're a top 30 team. Remember, there's 360-something teams in Division I college basketball. So to be top 30 means you're in the top 10%. They're number 30 in field goal percentage defense. So put aside how many points per game they give up because they play so fast, but they're in the top 10% in field goal percentage defense, which means they play elite defense. How about this? They're number 1 in rebound margin. In other words, the amount of rebounds they get relative to the amount of rebounds you get. They are number 1 in the country. And oh, by the way, they are number 15 nationally in assist to turnover ratio, which I think is kind of an incredible stat. They only average about 12 turnovers per game, which for a team that plays as fast as they do, that's kind of an incredible stat. 12 turnovers per game, playing so fast, all that good stuff. So Arizona wins. Arizona dominates. I think they're the best team in the country. I said it about Bama at this time last year. And the cool thing is Tommy Lloyd schedules to find out just how good they are. Arizona, I just mentioned they play Purdue this coming weekend. Yes, I am frustrated because it is on a streaming-only platform. But their next 3 games, they play Purdue this weekend. Then they play Bama in Phoenix on the 20th, which is a Wednesday. And then they play FAU before league play starts. Good thing is the FAU game, the Bama game are both on normal TV. You don't need a streaming platform, but I'm just here to say I think Arizona is the best team in college basketball. Credit to them for getting a win over Wisconsin. A couple other results. Tennessee really kind of needed a big win. Remember, this was a team that struggled in that Maui Invitational. Again, doesn't help when the other team takes 48 free throws against you. But they lost against Purdue and they lost against Kansas in Maui. And then they came back and played North Carolina in Chapel Hill and got boat raced. They got destroyed. And so I bring it up because I really thought Tennessee needed a nice bounce back. They get it against a very good Illinois team on Saturday afternoon in Knoxville. Don't think there's an amazing takeaway from this game. Illinois, frankly, Illinois is better built to win in March than Purdue is. If I had to bet on which team makes it further, I would actually take Illinois. But from the Tennessee perspective, I think that this was kind of the win that they needed. The offense looked much, much, much better. The defense, obviously, look, I mean, it's not going to totally show up when you give up 79 points, but they held Illinois to 35% from the field, 25% from three. That's kind of that old school Tennessee that you expect, especially on the defensive end of the court. So very nice win for Tennessee. Again, a game that they just desperately, desperately needed. They get the victory, very much needed. Credit to them. A couple other results, Gonzaga lost to Washington. Gonzaga, listen, I've been on this since April. It's not the same quality of team. They're not as bad as maybe I thought they would be, but this is a team that has a lot of work to do. And I just think, listen, there's a direct correlation between when Tommy Lloyd left to take the Arizona job. Tommy Lloyd had been the lead assistant at Gonzaga, and when Gonzaga kind of started to fall off. It's clear that Tommy Lloyd has built the number one team in the country this year. Arizona is the number one team in the polls. And a lot of the players that are playing at Arizona right now probably would be at Gonzaga if he was still the head coach or if he was still the lead assistant at Gonzaga. So I just bring it up because Gonzaga loses to Washington. It broke like an 18-19 game win streak against Pac-12 opponents for Gonzaga. Interesting thing for Gonzaga. You know who they play this coming Friday? Play the UConn Huskies in Seattle. That will be, how about this, a 10 Eastern tip-off on Friday night. So make sure to stay up late, grab your coffee. That will be a fun one. UConn facing Gonzaga on Friday night in Seattle was one I thought about going to, but decided against it. Really quickly, one other game that I do want to get to. And I know when I talk about it, the people that like this team are going to be like, Torres, thanks for acknowledging. The people that don't like them are going to say, why would you even talk about that team? The team I'm talking about? Oh, I'm talking about the Kentucky Wildcats who bounced back. Listen, they took a very bad loss last week against UNC Wilmington. And I said not to worry. I said not to freak out. And I bring it up because they bounced back with a nice 81-66 win over Penn. Now, I know what some of you are going to say. Torres, why would you even? They played Penn. Who cares? Well, first of all, Penn beat Villanova a few weeks ago, so let's not forget about that. But why this game, in my opinion, was important is because it really started to show you who Kentucky is going to be the rest of the season, okay? And so what do I mean by that? If you follow college hoops, and if you're listening to this podcast or this YouTube clip or whatever, you clearly care about college hoops, okay? And so with Kentucky, the early part of the season was interesting. They had 3 7-footers on their roster. 2 were injured. 1 has not yet been cleared by the NCAA. That's Zvonimir Visic from Croatia, has not been cleared. And Igana Nyenso and Aaron Bradshaw have not been able to play because of injury. And so it set up kind of this like weird conundrum for Kentucky fans. The team was playing really well. And you worried when the big guys come back, are we still going to be able to play fast, shoot a lot of threes, score a lot of points, do all that? Or are we going to get slowed down in the half court with all the big guys back? But the inverse was you also saw them against Kansas, who has Hunter Dickinson. Kansas got 1 million second chance points. They out-rebounded them. And he said, listen, to beat the best teams in college basketball, we are going to need these big guys to get healthy or eligible and to be their biggest player on the floor was 6'8". You can't beat real teams when your biggest player is 6'8". Well, I bring it up because the UNC Wilmington game, Aaron Bradshaw, 7-foot center, McDonald's All-American, one of the top 10 recruits in the country, made his debut coming off injury. But it was really Saturday when he had his breakout performance. Aaron Bradshaw finished with 17 points, 11 rebounds, 3 blocks, and a 3-pointer. And I am just here to say this. I know it was only Penn. I'm not making a big deal about it. I'm not claiming they're going to win the national championship. But this is a team that I believe is good enough to get to the Final Four. This is a very good team with very good guard play. And if they get that version of Aaron Bradshaw, I'm here to tell you Kentucky can play with anybody and potentially beat anybody. Not saying they will, but I'm saying they can. And when I look at Kentucky, this was something close to the complete version of what they're going to be. Now, obviously, Zvonimir Visic is probably going to get eligible at some point. But again, the guard play has been great. Reed Sheppard has been amazing. By the way, I almost called him Reed Travis, who actually played at Kentucky a few years ago. Reed Sheppard has been amazing. Rob Dillingham has been amazing. DJ Wagner was just getting going, got hurt, didn't play against Wilmington. He was back on Saturday. But the key for this team, at some point, they needed low post play. Well, Aaron Bradshaw comes in, 17 points, 11 rebounds. What I really liked about him, I thought he was very active for a McDonald's All-American that knows he's going to be a lottery pick. Like, it's easy to just kind of coast. No, this kid plays really hard. He was active. He was all over the floor. He's blocking. He's rebounding. He's running. He's rim running, whatever. He's playing really, really, really hard. And so you look at what he brings to Kentucky: shot blocking, rebounding. And he is a guy that can step out and hit outside shots. That is the missing piece for the Wildcats. Doesn't guarantee anything. And he's certainly going to have his hands full as the competition gets better starting next weekend against North Carolina and Armando Bacot in the CBS Sports Classic. But at the same time, this Kentucky team has all the pieces on the perimeter and on the wing. But the one thing they needed was that big guy down low. And I think more specifically, they need a big guy that isn't a hindrance, that isn't Oscar Tshiebwe, that isn't Zach Edey, that isn't the post up and, stand in the middle of the lane and clog everything up. Well, Aaron Bradshaw looked like that kind of guy. Runs the floor, active, rebounds, can step out and hit shots. And if he plays like that, it creates so many different, opportunities for Kentucky. Because one, you're obviously going to play him at the 5, but now Trey Mitchell, who was at the 5, can kind of play more at the 4 spot, but he can be a pick and pop 4. And I'm not going to get into the technicalities and all that, but that's a kid that can step out and hit threes. But he was having to play down low, having to guard the other team's center when he's really a small forward / power forward. Now he can play more on the perimeter. He can guard a guy his size. But then also, if you need to go big, you can play both of them together. But then Trey Mitchell can also be kind of a backup. You don't have to play him 31, 32, 33 minutes a game. It just changes everything for Kentucky. So I'm not going to oversell it. I'm not going to overreact. This segment has gone on long enough. But you look at what that team can be with Aaron Bradshaw, with those guards playing as well as they are. And I still go back to a couple of their guys aren't even playing to their capabilities. Justin Edwards, who many believed was the best Kentucky freshman on this roster, on Saturday finished with 6 points. DJ Wagner finished with 9 points. Justin Edwards is averaging 9.5 points per game coming out of Saturday. Now, maybe it's on Cal to get him a little bit more involved, but at the same time, if you're getting 6 points and 9 points per game from a guy that you thought was going to give you 14, 15, 16 and be a potential lottery pick, it speaks to the fact that you're probably in pretty good shape. And the one thing about Coach Cal, you can criticize him for whatever. He is great at bringing guys along, and he is great having guys that look like, struggling in November and December, having them look like All-Americans and playing up to their potential by March. Really excited to watch this Kentucky team grow, but Aaron Bradshaw brings a new dimension. Whew, that last segment was a doozy. Oh my goodness, I went off on Zach Edey. Poor Zach Edey. Zach Edey's mom, if your parents are listening, I'm sure you're very nice people. But the refereeing was abominable on Saturday. All right. I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. Time for me to get out of here. Listen, if you're not subscribed to the show, what are you doing? Who else brings you the college football heat, the college hoops heat, quite like Torres? The answer is nobody. Make sure you're subscribed to Apple, Spotify. Do me a favor. Go on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review. We had some negativity over these last couple weeks. A couple people were mad at what I said. I'm sure some Purdue fans will jump in there and give me some negative reviews. That's not cool. Make sure you're subscribed. Leave a 5-star review. Also, if you're not subscribed on YouTube, what are you doing at this point? What are you doing with your life? You need to reevaluate some things. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. I think that's it. We'll be back on Wednesday. Who knows what we'll be talking about by then? We could be talking about anything by then. World is our oyster. But I'm going to get out of here for today. Appreciate everybody's support. It's time for me to go. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. By the way, tell Pat McAfee unblock me too. I didn't do anything. I'll be back on Wednesday. New episode, Aaron Torres.